All right, gentlemen, it's been a bit of a hiatus. We haven't had class for a little bit. There was Pesach. There was other things. We've been busy. I think it was 3 weeks ago we last met. We are holding near the end of chapter 11 of the Tzemach Tzedek discourse, Mitzvahs Ha'amanas Elokus, the mitzvah of faith in God, where we are going through various various fundamental points of the Jewish faith. In chapter 11, we began to speak about time and about how God exists beyond time. And that discussion has taken us very far afield. We've spoken about a lot of things since we last spoke about time. We've been very, so to speak, very distracted in that way. We've gone off on a tangent or three. Because we said that in order to understand time, we have to understand the Midrashim, which talk about how God created worlds and destroyed them before the world was created. And we know that according to Chassidus, the Tzemach Tzedek, the first part of the chapter, the Tzemach Tzedek explained to us that time is not eternal. Time has not existed forever. Time was created when God created the universe, so to speak, more or less, right? Maybe at a spiritual stage, maybe at a physical stage. But time is a creation. Time has a beginning. Time itself has not existed forever. But the Midrash talks about God doing things, so to speak, it would seem, before time. And how can there be something before time? It doesn't make any sense, right? If it's before, that means it's part of time, right? To even have a concept of before or after, you need time. So how could it be that God was doing things before time? He was creating world, he was destroying world. He said, in order to understand that, we have to understand what it says, that God looks into the Torah and He creates the world. And that the Torah is the blueprint for the world. What does it say? In the Zohar, it says even more explicitly. In the Zohar that we read, I believe it was the Zohar, it says that God decided He wanted to create the world. So what does He do? He looks in the Torah. In the Torah it's written, let there be light. So God says, let there be light. He says what it says in the Torah, and the light is created. So in other words, the Torah seems to be the guide to Hashem of how to create the world according to the Zohar, which is a very radical thing to say, as the Tzemach Tzedek immediately asks, because how could God need the Torah to create the world? He needs the Torah to tell Him what to do. God is the author of the Torah. God creates the Torah as well, right? The Torah is God's. So how could it be that God has to look into the Torah and create the world? Couldn't God create the world directly? Why do we need the Torah? That He looks into the Torah like as His blueprint of what to do, and then He creates the world. And we said, in order to understand that, we have to answer a different question. The different question connects to what we learned earlier in this discourse over the previous weeks and months. Because we said that one of the fundamental questions of Chassidus, of Chassidut, of Jewish mysticism and Kabbalah, is to explain how is it that you get from one God to a world that's full of many, many different things. You go from a complete unity. You go from a God who is one, with Echad B'tachlis HaYichud, Yachid B'tachlis HaYichud, and B'tachlis HaPshitus. God is absolutely one and absolutely simple. God has no parts. God has no aspects. God has no body, of course, no form of a body. God is truly infinite, and to be truly infinite, as we've explained in this class many times, is to be truly one. And the two are interchangeable. He is completely one because He's completely infinite. He's completely infinite because He's completely one. There is no limitation, division, definition. There's nothing to Him. He just is what He is. He is God. So how could it be that you get from a reality such as that to a world of multiplicity, where we have not just one thing that's defined, not just two things that are defined, but nearly, it seems, an infinite number of things that are defined. They're divided in time and space and quality and nature, right, and all the different aspects of nature, right, color, sense, taste, touch, sight, understanding, purpose, meaning, right, all in all these ways, whether something's alive or dead, right, you have right, you have inanimate, and then you have a growing life, and then life, and then animal life, and human life, and all of these things, everything is divided one from the other in categories and then in individuals. How do you get from the unity of God to the multiplicity of this world? And the truth is that we already answered this question once earlier in this discourse at great length. And the short answer is that there's something called the Sfirot, or the Spheres, right? The Sfirot or the Spheres, just two different pronunciations of the same word, l'chaim, are the 10 intermediaries, or the 10 means by which God creates the world. The 10 Sfirot, otherwise known as God's wisdom, God's kindness, God's severity, and there's 10 of them. As it says in the Kabbalah, there's 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11. There's exactly 10 Sfirot. And the 10 Sfirot are used by God to create the world. Now the thing about the Sfirot is that they are something called Elokus, or Elokut, or as we would say in Yiddish, they're Getlich. They're not Got, but they're Getlich. You have something which is not God, which is not a creation, but is rather something in between, something called Elokus. The Sfirot are not God himself. They're not a creation like the universe or angels or souls or animals or chairs. They are an expression of God. They're transparent to God. They exist outside of Him. They're an emanation. They're like a light. And they are an expression, but they are not Him Himself. That's what the Sfirot are. And the Sfirot, as we explained at great length in earlier months and weeks in this discourse, each has a vessel and a light, a kli and an v'kli. A Sfirot is a light in a vessel. And as we explained, this is how you can have one infinite God create a world of many, many divisions and limited defined things. Because in the Sfira, what you have is you have an infinite light of God that interacts with and is defined by and invested in a limited and defined vessel. You have an infinite expression of the one God, and then it is invested in the vessel of kindness, and it becomes kindness, it becomes chesed. Whereas if the light is invested in severity and gvura, the light becomes gvura. And it is basically through the combination and the interaction of the 10 different spheres in infinite iterations that you arrive at everything that's in the creation, right? As we're counting now, we're counting the Omer. And if you count the Omer in the Chabad Siddur, there's a whole tefillah you say, which is connected to the Kabbalah, which is connected to the Sfirot. Each day has a different Sfira and a sub-Sfira, right? The first day was Chesed Shebechesed, kindness of kindness. And the second day is Gvura of Chesed, severity of kindness. But really, the truth is that we just count each Sfira with one sub-level, which is, and we only count 7 of the spheres. We count Zah and Malchus. We don't count the first 3. It's a separate issue. But the bottom line is we only count to one level. We count the sphera and its 7 sub-spheres, which is a week, and then we start over, which is 7 times 7, which is the 7 weeks of Omer, which is 49, right? So that's how 49 days, 49 specific sphirot and sub-sphirot. But the thing is that the truth is, as was explained in Chassidus and Kabbalah, really the iterations of the levels go on forever. It doesn't really stop there. You have kindness of kindness. Kindness of kindness itself, chesed shebechesed, is itself made up of all the sfirot. There's gevura shebechesed, right? There's tiferes shebechesed, there's chesed shebechesed, right? And that's only 3 levels. And the truth is that it goes on forever. There's no end to how far it goes on. And it's these different combinations where you get to very, very specific combinations of the spheres. These are what create all the multiplicity in creation. It's this process that creates the difference between a chair and a table and a frog, for example. Right? It's put in different words in Tanya. In the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe explains that the different nature of everything comes from its name. Right? That everything has a different name in Lashon HaKodesh, right? You have Shulchan, right? And then you have Tzvardeya. You have table and you have frog. And because of the different combinations of the letters, that's what creates it. And the truth is that it's talking about the same thing. It's the same thing with different names. It's the same process. The process is that these different vessels combine to create different realities, the spiritual forms of all of these things. So, the question of how you get from one God to a world of many different types of things is through the spheres, is through the sphirot. You have light and vessel, right? And we spent a great deal of time earlier explaining how light and vessel can interact and what's the nature of their interaction. And really, light and vessel are unified. They're really one thing. All of that's for a different time. But the bottom line is that if you can understand how and Kli, how light and vessel interact, you can understand how the infinite and the finite can interact. You understand how you get from one infinite God to many finite, limited, and defined creations. It's through the spheres. It's through the sphirot. Now, the question is that we ask in this chapter, we say, but really, that's not really an answer of how you get from one God to a world full of limitation. Why? Because really it's cheating. We sneak in the limitation into our answer. We sneak in the limitation with the kelim, with the vessels, right? We say that the light can interact with the vessels. The vessels are limited, right? You have chesed, you have gvura, tiferes. These are defined and limited entities. And then this limitation, these combination of these vessels allows you to create everything else. But the question remains, where do the vessels come from? How is it that all of a sudden you have 10 limited vessels? The same question applies, right? All we really did is we pushed the question further back. Our original question is, how do you get from one infinite God to a chair and a table, which are two things that are different, right? There's no divisions in God. How could you have two different things coming from one God, right? And the answer is, really, it comes through the sfirot. There's 10 sfirot, and the combination of the different 10 sfirot. One thing creates a shulchan, and one thing creates a kisei, one thing creates a table, and one thing creates a chair. One combination creates one, and one combination of sfirot creates the other. The question to ask then is, okay, so where do you get the sfirot from? You snuck in your limitation. You snuck in defined and limited things by saying there are 10 vessels. So my question is now, where do the 10 vessels come from? How do you get from one God who has no division to chesed and gvura and chachma and bina and all of the sfirot, all the 10 sfirot? That was our question that we're currently dealing with in the Maimer. So it's quite far away from the original question, which is about the nature of time, right? That's how we got into, like I said, we got very far into a different discussion. And we began to answer this question.
Closing the loop?
Of course. It's really only fully closed in the next chapter. So it's ongoing discussion. So the question is, where do the vessels come from? And we explained, using the spiritual worlds, we explained about different spiritual realities. We're focusing on 3 specifically. And I'm going to review very in brief, even though because we've discussed this at length before.
But even then, where was the separation? It's Surat HaNaga, it's not an actual thing.
Yeah, well, obviously, if you go back far enough...
So the question is, does it really exist?
No, if you go back far enough, obviously you're going to start with something that's barely a thing, right?
Right.
Because if something is beginning to separate out from the unity of God in any way, right? The truth is that the tzimtzums lo kipshuto, none of it's real, right? If it comforts you, if it makes you happy. That's a different discussion for a different time. Okay, so... The disclaimer is that its lack of reality may not be as comforting as you first think. It's not as unreal as you're hoping for, but it's more unreal than you assume. Let's put it that way. Anyway, that's a distraction. We're discussing where the vessels come from. We use 3 worlds, right? Normally, really, they're not really worlds. So it's not correct to call them worlds. Why? Because a world is called an olam. In Chassidus and Kabbalah is from Lashon Helem. Olam means concealment. World means a concealment of God. And really there are only 4 worlds, or 4 types of worlds, which are Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, and Asiya, are the 4 spiritual worlds we normally talk about. And the spheres that we've been discussing, these 10 spherot, which allow the creation of the world, really first appear, as we understand them, as they are in the creation of our world, in Atzilus, in the highest of the 4 spiritual worlds. Really, Atzilus is the beginning of our reality, in its most abstract and spiritual form, is in the world of Atzilus. That's really the beginning of the root of our reality is found there. But it is not the highest form of godliness. In fact, Atzilus is preceded by other spiritual realities, and those are the ones that we are talking about. So we're talking about the spiritual realities that God creates before He even creates the highest of the spiritual worlds. And these are there's really 2 before Atzilus, and Atzilus is the 3rd. So we've been discussing these things, and what they are called are Akudim, Nakudim, and Vrudim, are the 3 worlds that we have been discussing. From top to bottom, right? Akudim, which is from the same language as Akedah, the binding of Isaac, right? Akudim is a spiritual reality where everything is expressed as one. All of the 10 sfirot are there, and they're there actually, not just there in potential, but they have not yet split apart, right? Because the whole point is that it's a process to get from the unity of God to 10 Sfirot. So at the beginning of the process, there is an emanation, there is an expression of godliness. This expression of godliness contains all of the 10 Sfirot, but they are all there united as one. That's Akudim. And we're going to get back to Akudim because it's the main focus of our chapter. After Akudim comes Nekudim. Nekudim means points or dots, single points. In Nekudim, you have 10 separate Sfirot. The Sfirot separate into 10 different realities, but each one of those realities is radical. Each one, it's a fundamentalist place, chaotic place. It's also known as Olam HaTohu, the world of chaos, is the world of Nekudim. Why? Because each one of the 10 Sfirot has no room, has no potential to accept any of the other 10 Sfirot. Or to put it a slightly different way, even though Chesed and Gvura become separate, for example, to use two of the 10 Sfirot, even though God's kindness and God's severity become separate, in their separateness, if you were to look at the kindness in the world of Tehu, the world of Nekudim, you would see 100% kindness. You would see kindness still like Akudim. It's a kindness that would say, I am all that exists. I am the only thing that there is. And there are 10 things there that say, I am the only thing that exists. And none of them has any room for any of the others, which is why it's called Nekudim. They're points. They're separate. Each one is a separate point. They're not together. And that separate point, each one insists that it is the entire reality. So you have 10 realities, each competing, each one saying, I am the entire reality. This is inherently spiritually unstable, so to speak, is the way it's described. And there's something called Shviras HaKelim, which is the breaking of the vessels. There's too much light and not enough vessels to hold them, as the way it's described. We're not talking about Shviras HaKelim now, it's a different class. And this produces, the breaking of the vessels produces the world of Vrudim, which is also called the world of Tikkun, the world of order, as opposed to chaos, Tohu, and also called Atzilus, in our common parlance. Atzilus and the world of Tikkun, and the difference between Atzilus, Vrudim, and Nekudim is that here, at the beginning, at the root of the reality that we know, there are 10 spheres, but the 10 spheres, as we were discussing earlier, each one includes within it all the other spheres. It's not just pure chesed. Chesed also has gvura in it and tiferes in it, right? There's gvura shebechesed, tiferes shebechesed, right? Each one of the spheres contains within it all the other spheres, and continuing, as we said before, to infinite levels. They're all inter-included, they all have parts of each other within them, and so they form one orderly, stable reality in which each one is defined in terms of the other ones. They're all, each of the 10 spheres, which are separate, are defined by the other 9. Right? They're all defined one by the other, and so there's, so to speak, peace and stability and harmony. These spheres form one system, right? That system is called the world of Atzilus, and that's the first of the spiritual worlds that eventually becomes our world, in the spiritual evolution, the spiritual descent of these godly realities. But we are talking about Akudim, the first of these realities. Akudim, also known as Adam Kadmain, the supernal, or the primordial man, is another name for Akudim. Akudim is the first expression of godliness after the Tzimtzum. After God withdraws himself, so to speak, after God makes it possible for there to be a reality outside of himself, the first of those realities that he emanates, the first of those realities that derive from him and he expresses, is Adam Kadmon, is Akudim. And we've spoken at great length about Akudim. And what we've said is that Akudim, actually, because it contains within it all of the spheres, and all of the spheres are there, everything is actually there. Therefore, it contains all the spiritual worlds that derive from the spheres.
But Atik is not higher than Ak?
Atik and Arich are different names for similar things that we're describing. It's not different. It's just different ways of categorizing. It's a different discussion.
Okay.
So they self-contained.
It's a different discussion. It's a different discussion. We're using different names. It's not every name is on the list here. There's lots of things we're leaving out. There's lots of other realities and things like this, where we're looking. This is what we're focusing on, is this story. There's other pieces of the puzzle to be filled in elsewhere and by other Maimarim and other things. This is what we're talking about now. So in Akudim, you have one expression of godliness. That one expression of godliness includes within it all the spheres. And because all 10 spheres are included within this one expression, and the way it is there's 10 spheres. Here's what it says. It says there's 10 spheres. They're actually there, not only potentially there. They're actually there, but they're there not as themselves, but as part of one unified expression. They're not there individually. They are actually there as part of one expression. We mentioned in one of the... Pardon me?
Self-contained?
On the contrary, it means they have no self at all, really, in the proper sense, right? They have no distinct sense of self. There is no chesed versus gvura there.
Not self in the term... self.
No, but there is no chesed there. There is no gvura. There's no different spheres there at all. They're there, but they're there purely as part of something higher. The way it's described, we brought up this...
Something higher.
Yes. Something higher always, yes.
Operate on their own.
Of course. No, nothing operates on its own. All of this is expressions of God. All of this is something that God is constantly bringing into being.
God could have downloaded all that stuff.
So it's just like they said that God...
Everything that we're discussing is part of God.
The 10 he brought in one utterance.
Everything that we're discussing is part of God. Nothing is similar. Nothing is similar.
In the way those...
I don't know if that's similar, Ronnie.
No, the concept.
I don't know. The metaphor, as I brought up in a previous class, the metaphor that's used for the way that the spheres exist within Adam Kadmon is like the Eish and the Tzurach HaLamish, is the fire and the flintstone. Which, to very briefly reiterate, to very briefly cover it again, there's really 3 different types of fire it talks about in Chassidus. The metaphor, it's a mashal, it's a parable. It says there's actual fire, there's like flames, right? The flames, in a sense, are the realist form of fire because they're actually hot and they have all the qualities of fire, right? You can't contain them, they emit light, they emit heat, right? It's fire. Obviously fire. The weakness of the actual flames is that something which is so actual is easily extinguished, right? All you have to do is, if you take away that heat and that flame, all of a sudden the fire is not here anymore, right? Then you have something which is a little more abstract, which is glowing embers, right? Like what's left over at the bottom of the campfire. You have the glowing embers that's left of the fire. Now here you don't really have as much light and as much heat, right? But if you just blow on the ember, all of a sudden the fire comes out again. So here you have sort of an intermediate stage where you still have some light and heat, you still have the expression of the thing, but it's a little bit harder to take it away. The fire is there even if the light and heat are gone, right? Which is a novel approach, right? Even though I can't see the fire and heat now, in a way they're here deeper than when the campfire was burning so high, because even though the expression is not here, even though I can appreciate it, the fire is still here implicitly. And all I need to do is blow and the fire comes out again. And then you have the deepest level. The deepest level is the fire that's in the flintstone, right? Which is if you take the flintstone and you strike it, a spark comes out and it lights a fire, right? And the thing about the flintstone is that the fire here is at its most concealed. In fact, the flintstone shares nothing in common with fire. It's a rock, it's cold. There's no fire here, right? And you can't just blow on it to produce fire. You have to strike it, which is more of an effort. It describes in Chassidus. You have to really get at it and really strike it to make the fire come out. However, the advantage of the flintstone is that a flintstone can sit at the bottom of a river for 1,000 years, and you take it out and you strike it and fire comes out. In a sense, it's the realist form of fire, right? The fire is more real there than it is when the fire is actually burning, because this fire can't really be extinguished in the sense of the regular fire. The fire is really inherently there, right? The only issue is that it's hidden and you have to work to bring it out. This is the 3 levels of metaphor. So the spheres, as they are in the world of Adam Kadmon, are like the fire and the Tzurach HaLamish. They're there in a way that's even more real than they are later, but the thing is that if you were to look at it, you wouldn't see the spheres. You would see something else. You would see Adam Kadmon, which is not the spheres. Adam Kadmon is a single, unified expression from God. However, since the spheres are there, and not just in potential, but in reality, they are actually there, What does that mean? That means, as we described at length in the Maimer, that means that everything that has ever happened, that is happening now, and that will happen, both in the physical world and in the physical universe, and all of the spiritual worlds, everything is already in Adam Kadmon. Everything is already there. Everything that has taken place, is taking place now, and will take place, is in Adam Kadmon. And not just in potential, but in reality. Everything is there. The only thing is it's there like the fire in the Flintstone. You wouldn't see it if you went and looked at it, but nevertheless it's there. Everything is contained within Adam Kadmon, within the supernal man, within the world of Akudim. Which means that us sitting here studying this class is exactly there in the world of Adam Kadmon, even though you wouldn't see it there. Because really everything that we know in our entire reality comes from the 10 Sfirot, and the 10 Sfirot are all there in Adam Kadmon. They're all there in this unified and concealed way, but they're all there. Which is why, as we explained, Adam Kadmon is really here right now. There's no contradiction between the world, the physical world, and Adam Kadmon. The physical world is part of Adam Kadmon. The physical world always was part of Adam Kadmon. So really, the truth is that we're within Adam Kadmon now. In other words, Adam Kadmon was never limited to one specific place on the map. It's not like, as we said before, the world of Atzilus, which is specifically a spiritual and lofty reality. Adam Kadmon permeates everything that we know. Really, we've lived our whole lives awash in Adam Kadmon. We're just not aware of it, right? Everything that, all of our reality is present there. Not just the spiritual parts, but even the physical parts and the lowliest parts, the lowliest things. The humble chair at Chabad of Cobb is in Adam Kadmon. Everything is there. Not a chaotic stage, that's in the Kudim. In Akudim, it's not chaotic. It's there as part of a unity.
Why should a chair be chaotic?
As part of a unity, no, because we were talking about the world of chaos before. No, but it's there as part of the unity of the world of Akudim. Now, we explained 3 weeks ago. Now we're up to where we were 3 weeks ago. We explained 3 weeks ago. We're going to have to do all of this again next week for all the people that aren't here. We explained last week that this is what it means when it says God looks in the Torah and He creates the world. What does it mean? It means, what does it mean when the Zohar says He looks in the Torah says, let there be light. So God says, let there be, He reads from the Torah and He says, let there be light, and then there is light. What does that mean? The Torah does not create the world. What's the Torah essentially in this context? The Torah essentially is an intermediate between God and the world. It's elokus, it's an expression of God. It's neither the world nor God. And what does it do? What does God use the Torah for? God looks in the Torah to see what aspect of the creation He must create now. That's why He's looking in the Torah. Or to put it in other words, everything that God creates in the 6 days of creation, as described in the book of Bereshis, already exists in Adam Kadmon. What is God doing when He creates the world? Adam Kadmon is itself created, we should point out. Doesn't mean that it existed forever. Obviously, it's how God first emanates it. I should phrase it differently so there's no confusion. God first emanates. He first creates everything that it says in the book of Bereshis as part of Adam Kadmon, as part of a unity. That's the first way in which it's created. And what does it mean when He looks in the Torah, and the Torah says, let there be light, and then God says, let there be light, and He creates light? It means that He looks in the general expression of Adam Kadmon, which has everything that is going to be contained within it, and He selects a specific prat from the klal, a specific detail from that general reality, and He creates that detail specifically. That's what it means. He looks in the Torah, which is the blueprint. He sees how is this specific, particular creation going to be, and then He takes that reality from the general existence it has in Adam Kadmon, and He brings it down through all of the worlds and creates it. Creates that specific thing. That's what it means when it says God looks in the Torah and He creates the world. The Torah is the blueprint of how to translate the unified creations of Adam Kadmon into the particular realities of the world. That's what the Zohar is describing. So we said in the Maimer. So it's not that the Torah creates the world, as the Zohar says. It's God looks in the Torah and He creates the world. Right? In other words, Adam Kadmon, all these realities are tools. They're in a sense, right? They're intermediaries that God uses in His process of the creation of the world. He takes the reality from God looks at Adam Kadmon. He looks in the Torah and He takes that reality from Adam Kadmon and He creates that reality in the world. He creates the world according to that reality, I should say. Okay, let's learn a little bit inside. You may finish the chapter, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's time. Okay. There's little time. Okay. Let us start. Let's go back a little bit, actually. Okay.
וזה מה שכתוב בית חיים?
Now I'm going back, I think, to. Let's look on 353 in the English. V'zeh v'zoyar. That's where we're going to start. Page 353 in the English translation. V'zeh v'zoyar. On this basis, we can appreciate the wording of the Zohar's statement. Page 353. 4 lines up from the bottom of the page. You see in the Hebrew? It'll be near the end of the parak. V'zeh shekasav v'zoyar. Probably somewhere on that page. Yeah, I'll go further and you'll have more words to work with. Okay, page 353, 4 lines up from the bottom. V'zeh shekasav v'zoyar. This is what the Zohar says. Kochabrichu istakel ba'araisa ubara alma. God looks in the Torah and creates the world. Istakel davka shum b'chinas einayim da'ak. He looks specifically, which is describing the eyes of Adam Kadmon. I didn't mention it in my review, but we've been speaking about different parts of Adam Kadmon. I don't know how important it'll be. If I need to explain it more later, I will. Shum b'chinas kelem hachitzonius da'ak, which is the external aspect of Adam Kadmon, the aspect of Adam Kadmon which goes on to create the world. Shanikra or klali, which is called the general light, right? The general light, meaning the absolute most general light. The light that's so general, it contains everything within it. There's nothing outside of it. That's how general it is. All of the spiritual worlds and the universe, past, present, and future, everything is included within Adam Kadmon, the general light. V'sham hu sheirash haTorah. There is the root of the Torah. Shenikra mashal kadmoni, which is called he translates it here, the primeval or the primordial analogy, the old metaphor, the old analogy. Kihima bechinas chitzonius chachma bina da'ak, which is from the external aspect of chachma and bina of Adam Kadmon. Chemaimer nov das chachma shel Torah. The aftergrowth of wisdom is the Torah, as described before. Hine bav al yada ha'orein sof mahava ha'elam. It is through Torah, in other words, through the Torah, which has its root in Adam Kadmon, that ha'orein sof mahava elam, that God's infinite light, meaning God in His full expression, God expresses Himself to create the world. Shal yedei ha'klal nimshach achar kach ha'prat, because after the general light of Adam Kadmon, as we've been describing, comes the specific creation. The lavda araisa bara alma. It's not that the Torah creates the world. It's not that the general thought of the world, as there is in Adam Kadmon, creates the world itself. In other words, we're saying it's specifically not like something that Darrell was describing, where God invests all of this power into Adam Kadmon, and then Adam Kadmon goes and creates the world. That's specifically not what's the reality. On the contrary, this is all just an expression of God. God acts through Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon is a tool or a vessel of sorts. works. It is through Adam Kadmon, it is through the Torah that God creates the world. God in His infinite expression creates the detailed realities through this general thought of Adam Kadmon. Or the Torah says, "Let there be light." Hainu, which means what? The light as it exists within this general expression of godliness. Right? He's talking about the first day of creation. But the truth is, as I remember saying 3 weeks ago, it doesn't have to be. The term light can be confusing because it's being used to describe both things. It could be anything. Right? It could be any of the statements from creation. Right? God says, "Let there be fish in the sea." Right? It's the same thing. God looks at how the fish in the sea, He sees, it says, what the Zohar says is, it's written in the Torah, "Let there be fish in the sea," which means God looks at where in Adam Kadmon there's a reality called fish in the sea, which, as you'll recall, is not just fish in the sea, the literal fish in the sea, but is fish in the sea at all of the spiritual realities which the fish in the sea correspond to. And we know that the 10 utterances used in the creation correspond to the 10 sfirot, right? In other words, each one of the utterances used in the creation of the world, where it says, God says, "Let there be something," corresponds not just to that specific creation, but rather to a whole host and a whole series, really an infinite number of creations that derive from that sfira, that derive from that one of the 10 godly expressions. So really, it's not just the fish. When it says "let there be fish," the fish are literally fish, but they're also all of the spiritual realities that go into creating the fish. Right? I think it's the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, or the fish in the sea, birds in the sky are together. I can't remember. I need more Bible study. So he looks into the Torah, which means he sees how this specific reality, call it the fish in the sea, exists in this general light. And then he brings it into revelation in the creation of a specific light, a specific creation. A specific creation. Okay. So that's what it means when God looks in the Torah and the Torah tells him what to say and he says it. He looks in this general light, in this general expression, and then it tells him, he sees what he needs to create, and then he takes it from that general expression and he creates that specific reality in all of the spiritual worlds and in the physical world. Okay, I'm on the last line of page 355. You with me in the Hebrew?
You're saying he has to create it in the spiritual world and then...
Correct, yes. Because
it wasn't already created.
No, this is itself, remember, is the creation process of the spiritual worlds as well. Right? This precedes most of the spiritual worlds. It precedes Nakudim and Akudim and Atzilus, Bri, Yitzir, and Asiya. These all come after this process. So it's really, this is the process. If you want to say that Atzilus is in a sense like the spiritual DNA or the spiritual building blocks of our reality, or from which our reality derives, so this is the process by which the DNA is created. Right? This is the process by which. So when God sees, "Let there be fish," let's say that's written in Adam Kadmon, that's written in this initial reality, this initial unified expression, the general expression. And then he takes it and he creates the specific thing. We don't just mean he creates the specific thing physically, because he has to create the source of the specific thing, and the source of the specific thing is in Atzilus. So he takes this one sfira and he creates it. First he creates it in Ilamatehu, where it's imperfect because it has a certain yeshus, and it believes it's the only reality. It believes the fish as they exist in Nakudim believe that they're the only thing that exists. Then there's Shviras HaKelim, and he creates it as it is in the world of Tikkun, which is the fish as they're part of everything else. Fish don't exist just as fish. In a fish, you have the whole universe, right? The fish contains all the sphera for fish contains the sphera for all the other things, right? The sun and the moon and the earth and the sea and the stars and the water and the whole thing, it's all included within the fish in a different way, right? There's the sun of the fish and the moon of the fish, right? And then you'll have the fish of the son of the fish. I'm using the words from Bereshis instead of the names of the Spheres, right? Which sounds a bit odd, but really it's the same thing. And then God takes the reality of Atzilus and he creates it in a way of Chemer HaYuli, where it actually becomes a separate creation from him, but it has no defined form, which is how the Spheres are in Bria. Then he gives them a general form as it is in Yetzirah, and then he gives them a specific form as it is in the world of Asiya, and then Or Ein Sof joins joins it with chaymer, joins it with material, and it becomes the physical reality of our universe. And that whole process is initiated by looking in the Torah. When we say looking in the Torah, we mean looking in the root of Torah as it is in the world of Adam Kadmon, as where everything exists, where everything is unified. When we say that everything is in the Torah, by the way, this is part of what we mean. When we say that everything is in the Torah, right? We mean very literally that the root of the Torah, everything is in the Torah. It's not an accident. It's not that God looked at the world and then he put everything in the world in the Torah. It's actually the opposite. The reason why everything is in the Torah is because first came the Torah, which had everything as an or klali and a simple light, and then everything was created from that. So obviously everything is in the Torah, right? That's where everything comes from, the Torah. Everything comes from this one general light, which is the root of the Torah, right? Okay, I'm on the last line of page 355. V'lachein, yes, in the Hebrew, you're with me?
Yeah.
V'lachein, therefore, bar nash, keep an eye on the time, someone. Bar nash da asik ba'araisa makayim alma. A person, it says, where does it say? Zohar, as the Zohar goes on to explain. A human being who studies Torah maintains the world, right? It says, the famous line is, God looks in the Torah and creates the world. A human being studies the Torah and maintains the world. Again, God looks in the Torah and creates the world. A human being studies the Torah and maintains the world.
So they say if there's one moment that nobody will study the Torah, the world would cease to exist.
That's true.
Well, what is it? What do we say? Because by speaking the words of the Torah regarding every single dimension of existence, you cause light and life, vivification, life energy to be drawn from God's infinite expression, al yedei haklal el aprat, from the general to the specific. This is the secret, this is the Kabbalistic secret of why the sages spoke about every day, about current events, right? Everyday occurrences the sages spoke about. This is what it says in the Gemara in Shabbos. Shadibur shel chachamim bechinas shiratzim, bechinas. That when the Chachamim, when the sages spoke about shratzim, which is literally like creepy crawlies, lizards and insects and things like that. For example, like someone who injures, if you injure a lizard on Shabbos, you're chayav. You're not supposed to, right? You know, you're not supposed to hurt or injure animals on Shabbos, even pests, right? Even like a spider or something like that, right?
Cockroaches.
So you're not supposed to injure animals on Shabbos. So for example, the sages are talking about lizards, right? So why is this? That's the whole question. Is the great Torah sages, they care about lizards. It's like this is interesting to them. They're talking about they care about what you do to a small animal on Shabbos, right? Rather, what's the secret? Hu hamahava esan v'shorshan. This is what creates them and their source. In other words, the sages talk about all sorts of things because it is actually the study of Torah which helps bring these things into existence. In other words, this is what we say, that we are really partners in the creation, right? Particularly through Torah study. Because the same process that God goes through to create the world, where he takes from the general reality and using the Torah creates these specific things as they are, we access and, so to speak, reinvigorate and re-perform that act every time we study a specific detail in Torah, right? Because if you look at the Torah, right, the Torah, it's explained in Chassidus, one of the most beautiful, in my humble opinion, to me, one of the most beautiful sugyas or things that it talks about in Chassidus is that the hishtalshelus of Torah parallels the hishtalshelus of the worlds. The way that the Torah comes down, the way that the Torah expresses itself into smaller and smaller details as time goes on, really parallels the process of God's creation of the world. The bottom line is that by taking the Torah in its initial state is just one thing. right? Even though it's hard for us to understand, because as we get it as the Chumash, it's already divided into words, right? Which is the real miracle of the Torah Shebichsav, which is that God has created something which is divided into words and yet still contains that infinite unity, which is impossible for the human mind to understand. All of that is a discussion, is to be put aside for the moment. The bottom line is that Torah in its initial form is one unity, is one simple thing, just like its root in Ak, right? And as the Torah comes down through the generations and over time, and we focus on more and more specific cases, first of all, we see there's no end to the process. Second of all, we see that the Torah comes to speak about lower and lower and more particular and more specific realities. And the reason why the sages were interested in these specific realities, to talk about whether you could injure a spider on Shabbos, which is a very particular small law, so to speak, about a small reality, the reason why that is of interest to the studiers of Torah from a Kabbalistic and from a mystical perspective is because when you learn the Torah, you are basically re-establishing the existence of these things. Because what are you doing, right? You're demonstrating that God's Torah speaks even to these small realities, which is another way of saying you're showing that the general light of Ak, the general light of Adam Kadmon, the general light of Akudim, can be and is brought down to this small and low level. You're basically demonstrating the creation of the world again when you learn the Torah of something. When you learn the Torah that you're not allowed to hurt a spider on Shabbos, you're basically going through the same process, sort of in reverse, like a mirror image, because you're coming to the Torah as a creation, whereas the Torah is created and coming out of God, right? It's sort of, you're coming at it in reverse, the difference between what's called in Chassidus an Or Yashar and an Or Chayzer, a direct light and a returning light, a whole different discussion. I know I'm speaking a lot of words and maybe I haven't got to the point yet. The bottom line is you're coming and from a different perspective, doing the same process that God is when He creates the world, when you derive a specific prat, a specific detail of the laws of the Torah. God in His creation of the world, that's basically what He was doing. He was taking the general Torah, which has everything in it as a complete unity, and He was seeing, in that generality, He was seeing the specific creations. Oh, here's the fish, let there be fish. Here's the light, let there be light. And then from there to all of the nigh infinite or infinite individual creations. So there's not just fish in general, but there's each specific fish. Yeah. What do you mean? It's
it's one thing. It's or klali. How does
but the or because the or klali really contains within it 10 things. Right, the Or Klali contains within it the spheros, but they're spheros agenuzos, they're hidden spheros, and it has to be brought out in a process not unlike striking the flintstone. We haven't described it yet. It's not really the concern of this minor, but it's spoken about. It's part of the. It's a topic to talk about. So So really learning Torah is a reaffirmation. You are re-performing. When you learn the Torah of particular details of the creation, you're essentially re-performing, re-establishing, and demonstrating the process that God goes through to create those specific things in the first place. Which is why it says God looks in the Torah and creates the world, and man studies the Torah and sustains the world, right? You don't create it anew, but when you're not creating the lizard for the first time. But God creates the lizard, and then when you learn the halacha concerning the lizard, you're saying that the Torah, the one Torah, which contains within it the entire universe, speaks about this specific thing, right? That essentially is the process of its creation. That's what God said as well when He created the world. So when you study the Torah of that thing, maintenance, sustaining. Same thing, Second line on page 357. So too it is with all matters in Torah, as is written elsewhere. What is understood from all of this? That the order, the Seder Hishtalshelus, the chain-like order of descent of the world, as it's often translated very awkwardly, the order of the world, the whole system of the worlds, as they go from one level to the next, right? As we've been describing, right? There's all these different levels, and everything is in a certain order. You go from one step to the next step in the process, right? This whole process is bebechinas klal uprat, has a nature of the general and the specific. You go from the general to the specific is the process, is how it works.
We have it in the morning prayer. This is one of the rules, no?
Yes, kal frata frata kal. Yeah, it's part of the rules of Torah study. That's a whole different thing. You know that Rabbi Yishmael's rules, I think, correspond to Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim. It's a whole. They also have their whole own sugya and Chassidus. It's the 13 rules of Torah study. You also know that elsewhere there's more rules, right? The 13 rules is only one brayso. 48, I think, if I'm not mistaken. That's the long list, right? The long list is 48. The short list is 13. No, it's make your head spin. All right. So the order of the worlds is general to particulars, generals to specifics. In order to bring about the creation of specific existences from God's infinite unity, which, as we've said, is above and beyond even this general expression, as we said before, right? God himself in his expression is far above even Adam Kadmon. Adam Kadmon itself, right, if you'll remember, just for the advanced student who may remember, this was the disagreement between the Arizal and the Ramak that I think we discussed 3 weeks ago, right? And we side with the Arizal, that this whole thing that we're describing, this general light, is not the pure expression of God himself. This itself is after the Tzimtzum. It's a level. It's a reality that God creates. It's not God himself, or the pure expression of God himself. The pure expression of God himself is infinitely above even this general light. So he's above all of this. So the first general category from which the details derive is really Adam Kadmon, is this akudim that we've been describing. After that, it becomes more particular, more specific when there are then 10 spheres of nekudim, of tehu, and va'achar kach nifretu bevrudim, and then they become even more particular and more subdivided in the world of vrudim, in the world of tikkun and atzilus. Liyais, Metzias, Rabbis, B'Sfiros, where many forms exist within the Sfiros, al yedehis kalalusam zemezeh, through them being inter-included with one another, as we explained. V'kol echad b'chinas klal, and each one of these inter-included Sfiros is itself general, legabe pratean ivraim, in comparison to actual specific creations, sheyumshach mikol Metzias Sfiros b'biyah, which are drawn down from all of the spheres in Bria, then Yetzirah, then Asiyah. For example, Chesed of Atzilus. From Chesed of Atzilus is drawn the camp of the Malach Michael, right? Kuf Pei Elef, 180,000 angels in the camp of Michael, as is described in the Zohar. Chesed is the general creation in comparison to these particular angels, which are drawn from the sphere, right? Angel, for those who don't know, angels are lower than spheres. Angels are actual creations as a rule. There may be exceptions. But generally speaking, angels are creations, right? As I said before, sfirot are not creations. Sfirot are expressions, right? And creations are lower than godly expressions. They're actual separate beings, separate creations from God. Generally speaking, we say the angels begin in the world of Bria, right? And they derive from the world of Atzilus. So we're saying he's going through, the Tzemach Tzedek is going through the level, the steps, right? From general to most specific. So from the general chesed of Atzilus, which is one united chesed, inter-included from all the other spheres, but still chesed, right? From that comes specific creations. Like, for example, what's the specific creations here? The 160,000 malachim of the camp of Michael. Whatever that means, which is probably itself beyond human understanding. Whatever that means, right? And then whatever is drawn further and further below, is more and more divided, is more and more multiplicitous. Nevertheless, there is nothing in the particular which did not exist previously in the general. Which is another way of saying, the way I've said it in this class before, is that generally speaking, after a certain point, creation is a subtractive process in Chassidus. Creation is not adding. Creation is not with a plus sign. Creation is with a minus sign, right? Everything was already in Ak. Everything after that is just minus. First, the unity of Adam Kadmon is removed to reveal the 10 spheres that were implicit there. Right? Then the infinitude of those spheres is removed so that each one has room for all of the other ones in it. Right? Then you remove the bittul of those spheres and they become a yesh. You remove their subjugation, their self-abnegation to God, and they become an independent being. And then you have angels left over, right? And then from the angels, you remove their holiness, and then you get the world of Yetzirah. And then you remove from that, and you get the world of Asiyah. And then you remove from that, and you add some material, some gashmiyut, some physical material in, some chomer, and all of a sudden you have physical reality. So it's all minus, it's all subtractive, which is he's saying here in a different way, ein befrat elamasha be'achlal. There is nothing in the particular that was not in the more general. Everything was there before. The act of creating these independent beings is all subtractive. You're taking away. God is taking away various things, not adding new things. Right? The new things everything was in Ak. Everything is just all that's happening is he's taking away more and more things until what's left is the limited creation that we know.
They're still in Ak.
Taking them away to in the next level, right? That's what makes it the next level. That's the whole point, right? It's a different way of looking at it, right? Is that you have the it's a bit like more of a 60s insight, maybe more of something you might hear in a college dorm room. But when you speak, right, you imagine, it's more proper to imagine not that you're sitting here and you're speaking and the words are coming out of you, but rather that you are moving backwards and the speech is being left behind. More describes the way God creates, which is true. That's the process of when God speaks and creates, right? The words are always there within God, right? But what makes the words turn into a reality, a separate reality from God, is that God removes himself, right? So the speech, it's not that the speech goes out from God, it's that the speech remains in place and God removes himself. All that's left over is the speech, right? Different way of... yeah. Okay. The second line on page 359, how much longer do we have here? I can't see. Is that 10 minutes?
25 minutes more.
Don't make things up. Dahainu, shafrat enei hischadshus le'Rabbi Aklam, on the second line of 359. The detail, the particular, is not an innovation. There's nothing new to it in comparison to the general level, the general expression. Ella rak ma sheba be'eschalkus befratius. It is only that it has become more divided into a more specific or more particular form. And always in the more general form, always in the original general expression, all of the details were already there. But they were all included in that unity. They were all part of one thing. There were many things, but they were all there as part of a unity. Right? Kamei, what's his mashal? What's his metaphor? HaMishnah legabe HaGemara. There's also a famous metaphor from Chassidus. Like the Mishnah in comparison to the Gemara, right? As you may know, a crash course in the Mishnah and the Gemara, very crash. The Mishnah is the original, right? The general rule was, let's put it this way. The rule was, at first, that you're not allowed to write down the oral Torah, the Torah Shabbat Peh. That's what makes it the oral Torah, as opposed to the written Torah. Right? Now all the Torah is written. Right? Where's the oral Torah? It's all in books. Right? Originally, and when I say originally, I mean from Mount Sinai onward, the oral Torah, the oral tradition, which was given along with the text that Moses taught his students, who taught their students, who taught their students, and so on down the line, that Torah was never meant to be written down, or at least that was the commandment. The commandment was you are not allowed to write down the oral Torah. By the way, conversely, you're not supposed to oralize the written Torah, by the way. Like, you're not supposed to transmit the written Torah orally. In fact, it's a whole question of whether you're even supposed to say psukim, for verses from the Torah, without reading them from a sefer. It's interesting. Whether you're supposed to really say Pesukim by heart. I think in the end you are, but there's a whole question of whether you're really supposed to just say verses from the Torah. The written is supposed to remain written, and the oral is supposed to remain oral, right? Then, as you may know, what happened very famously under the Greek rule and then the Roman rule, and as time was going on, basically what took place is that the ability to remember and the ability to understand and the ability to transmit in peace to your students all of the oral Torah began to fall off dramatically because the Jews became an oppressed people, and the people who still remembered all of the teachings were few and far between, right? And some of them were being killed because they were teaching Torah against the law of the various oppressions and all of these things. So basically, they followed the rule, Es lasa es la Hashem haferu terasecha, which means in a time of action for God, the Torah is overturned. In other words, this is to be used advisedly. This cannot be used in your day-to-day life. But someone like Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi could say that in order to save the Torah, I might have to break part of the Torah, which is exactly what happened. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, the famous Rebbe, wrote down what is called the Mishnah. The Mishnah is a very, very short, very terse, very compressed. It's like a zip file. The Mishnah is like a zip file. Every single word is chosen. The whole thing is quite a short book. You can print the whole Mishnah is printed in a book that's this big. 6 Siddharim, 6 orders of the Mishnah. Each Mishnah contains various Masechtas, 69 Masechtas in the Shisha Siddhar Mishnah, right? That's the whole Mishnah. And that's a nice print, right, with commentaries and things. So the Mishnah became the basis for the written oral Torah, right? Then what happened was that the Mishnah was never the whole thing. The Mishnah was really a study aid, is really what it was. It was the essence, like a zip file. It was the nakuda, the point at the center. And then around the Mishnah there were all these other discussions and all these other debates and the entire process of learning Torah. But the thing is that they weren't recorded because they hesitated to record them because it was supposed to be oral. So they recorded like the minimum of what they felt was necessary. Rav Yehuda Hanasi recorded in the Mishnah. Then, later, all of the discussions that took place from the time of the Mishnah until a few centuries later were compiled into a book that we know as the Talmud or the Gemara, right? It was compiled by Rav Ashi and Ravina in Babylon, in Galus Bavel. And there, the later Galus Bavel, I should say, there in Babylon, they compiled the Babylonian Talmud, and the Talmud is gigantic compared to the Mishnah. Right, the Talmud is here. The Talmud is a shelf. This isn't even a full set. Right, it's the whole. It's gigantic. Right, the Babylonian Talmud. So from the Mishnah, which is this little point, they created, and the Talmud is based on the Mishnah, right? Officially, the Talmud is a commentary on the Mishnah, and really everything in the Talmud is rooted in the Mishnah, but sometimes to find the root of it in the Mishnah is very difficult. The Talmud is just very lengthy. It goes on all sorts of tangents that make the tangents taken in this class look like nothing, right? It's absolutely massive, a huge work, right? And so the interesting thing is that as a commentary on the Mishnah, as what's supposed to be expounding on the Mishnah, you're taking something which is very small, and you're showing that in that very small thing, there's so much more depth, right? It's massive, it's huge. This one little book really contains within it this whole shelf. And really the actual printed Gemara on the shelf is really just the beginning. Once you start adding on all the other commentaries, it's shelves and shelves, a whole library, right? So so he's saying here that the comparison of how the worlds are later compared to how they are in Adam Kadmon, he's giving a mashal. The mashal is like the Gemara is in the Mishnah. He's saying Adam Kadmon is like the Mishnah. It's the klal. The klal contains within it, the general expression contains everything within it, right? But everything is within it, not in an explicit way. Where you can't go and say, where does Rava teach that between Shabbos and Yom Tov you have Yain Kiddush Nerav Dala Yak Ezman, that Yak Nahaz is the order you follow in the brachos when you make Kiddush on Motzei Shabbos, between Shabbos when you're going Shabbos into Yom Tov? How do you know that's the order of the brachos that you make, right? And really that's only one opinion, that's the one we follow. There's like 11 other opinions there. So how do you find this one opinion? Go look in Arbe Psachim in the Mishnah where the Gemara that it's based on, and find me that opinion in the Mishnah, right? The whole point is that it's there implicitly. It's not there in a revealed way. If you look there, you're not going to see Yak Nahaz, unless you already know what you're looking for, in a way, or unless you're very, very, very smart, right? The whole point is that it's there implicitly. The prat is there, but it's not there. It's there in reality, but it's there in a way that it's concealed, and if you look there, you'll never see it. You'll only see the klal. There's the klal, the general expression, which is the Mishnah, and hidden within it is the prat. And really, the prat has all of these details that you would never find in the Mishnah. So too it is, Kain Lamaila, right? So too above in the spiritual world, that Adam Kadmon contains within it everything that comes after, like the Mishnah contains within it the Gemara. And even though there are details in the world that come after, that you would think that if you were to see Adam Kadmon, you would never see them there, nevertheless it's all there implicitly, and all that the creation of the world is doing is taking things that are there implicitly, in a hidden way, in the klal, and expressing them in the prat, right?
It's getting more difficult to be a Jew these days.
Well, if it makes you, I was going to say if it makes you happy, this transition from Mishnah to Gemara happened like 2 millennia ago. So if it's this is old news, should be old news already. You're still complaining about it. That's the most Jewish thing, is that we're still complaining about things that happened 2,000 years ago. But those are to make it easier, not to make it harder. We used to have a rabbi in yeshiva. What time is it? Is that past?
Quarter to nine.
No, it's not quarter to 9. Is it really 9:15? Wow, we went way over.
Upside down.
We had way over. So, okay, fine. Let's stop here. We'll continue this next time. I have to print out the next chapter because we're almost done with this one. We had a rabbi in yeshiva that he used to yell at us because he was the hardest. I don't know if he was the hardest class, but it felt to me like it was the hardest class that he taught. And what was his whole class? His whole class was just Tosfos, right? Tosfos is a commentary on the Gemara. Tosfos is difficult. Rashi is the easy one. The famous thing is that Rashi is the easy one, and Tosfos is the difficult one. Rashi just says what's going on in the Gemara. It's a commentary, like Rashi on the Torah, right? You read Rashi, and Rashi helps you and explains what's actually taking place in this page of Talmud. And then you read Tosfos, and it's like you find out that Rashi is a disaster, right? Because everything that Rashi says contradicts everything else that Rashi says, and there's so listen to what I'm saying. So you read the Tosfos, and this Rashi contradicts what Rashi said in that other Masechta. So then you have to go learn that other Masechta, and you have to learn what the Rashi said there, and then you have to understand how Tosfos is explaining the difference, or he's challenging Rashi, or all of these things, and he's making and most of the time the question is much easier to understand than the solution. The solution of Tosfos is very difficult to understand. So he used to complain to this rabbi in yeshiva that Tosfos makes such a mess of the whole. Everything was perfect until we started learning. Tosfos. Then he ruined everything, and he used to laugh at us. He used to say, "You think Tosfos is ruining it? It's on the contrary. If you were a little smarter, you would have Tosfos' questions, and Tosfos would be fixing it, not ruining it. Right? He's only ruining it because you're stupid. He's ruining it because you didn't have the questions that he had. If you had the questions that he had, you would be turning to him like how could it possibly be this way? And he would answer all your questions. Right? It's only because you're so stupid and you don't see the problems that you think he's breaking it. Really, he's fixing it.
Schottenstein is making it a little easier.
Schottenstein is making easier by basically not participating in the process. It's not making it easier.
Well, then it's chewing it for you and give it to you already there.
Yeah, in other words, it's not really participating in the process. You learn Tosfos, learn different things.
He doesn't let you participate.
Yeah, and the thing is that he's always following one shita or one way of understanding it. Right? These are things that discussions about them have been going on for thousands of years, and he's just telling it to you like this is the way of learning it. It's like come on. There's no way of learning it. It's his way, one way of learning it. But you're right. It's a good study tool, and I would never. I'm a big fan of the article. Don't get me wrong. If you can't learn Gemara without it, it's much better to learn with it than not learn at all. That's for sure.
I learned with Sali and said, I don't have to agree with everything he said.
That is true. That's correct. You don't have to agree with everything he says.
But it scares me. So then I started insisting, and I read to him. Then